Coalition and co-founder of Rock Community. Both organizations collectively reach more than 6 million readers per month. Welcome, Dr. Boyd. Listen.
Hello.
I'm so excited.
Oh, I'm excited too. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate the invitation.
Oh, no, thank you for coming. So we got a short time. We got like 30 minutes, so we're going to get right to something that I need to ask, which I got a whole bunch of stuff. We need to get all of that. So
let's do it.
The first thing I always ask all my men who come to share their pieces, tell me a little bit about the blueprint. Tell me about the relationship with your mother and the relationship with your father.
Okay. My blueprint. You said my blueprint. You mean like just how I'm made with what my experiences. Yeah. I think my blueprint is one where I'm a fierce believer in Black love as a solution to almost everything. I think that a lot of our problems as a community, our challenges, rather, and our hurdles, our opportunities for improvement, come from the struggles we've had, learning how to love each other and learning how to manage relationships, not just romantic relationships between, say, a man and a woman, or even between two women or two men, whatever, whatever category it's in. But also, you talk about friendships, you talk about relationships with your parents, relationships with your kids, business partnerships, like all these things factor in terms of,
determining and deciding and shaping what your life is going to look like. And if you are not healthy in any of those areas, then you're going to have a lot of problems. And I think that actually explains a lot of our challenges economically, politically, and otherwise.
Yeah, so share a little bit about your relationship with your mother and your father.
Well, my mother is a strong Christian woman. She was 17 years old when she gave birth to me. She was a single mother at that time. She married my father when I was 3. My mother is very, very spiritual, very energetic. She struggled with some depression when I was a kid. I didn't know it. And she was very, very young. So my parents were learning how to be parents when I was growing up. They were like almost like older siblings, really. I remember, things like my mother's 23rd birthday and stuff like that, and my father is a strong Black man, in all those senses of the phrase. He ain't no punk. He's a Vietnam veteran. He had his own, his own trauma, from just all of that, Vietnam, the drugs, all that stuff. But he also became a man of great substance and responsibility. He's very big on family and taking care of the people that you care about, things like that. And so I learned a lot of that from him, and so it's kind of a mixed bag. It's like growing up, I can't say I had this model childhood, but I also can't say that it was as bad as it could have been. Also, I'm a believer that everything that you go through that's a struggle can be flipped into a superpower if you play it right. And so I appreciate my parents. I feel like they gave me a lot of superpowers.
I love it. It says in your bio that you were deemed special education. So I have a son who's on the autism spectrum, and I know that's a struggle more for me as a parent than it probably is for him. So you went from special education to be one of the biggest financial advisors in the world. What would you say to those young men who are listening who may be in special education, ADHD, and what would you say to those parents?
I would say that obviously you can't give up on your kids, and everybody has their strengths and weaknesses. And I would say that, having your children working with people that can get the most out of their God-given abilities is obviously essential. This idea that somehow because a person is in a certain category that you just give up on them, or this child's in special ed, so why should we teach them how to read and how to function? That obviously can't work, because they've got to grow up and they got to live life and they got to be able to function at their highest level. So whatever that person's a natural ability may be, one way or the other, I think all of us do best when we're living our best life, so to speak. When we're getting our opportunity to really, live whatever that purpose happens to be. And so I think that applies for all kids. And so with our kids, to be honest with you, all my kids have different ability levels, in different areas. Right. And, so the question is, what are you best at? And then let's help you find your mountaintop in that area. So one person's mountaintop might be, geographically speaking, like your mountaintop might be in South America, yours might be in Africa, yours might be in China. Let's get you to South America, China, and Africa so you can climb the highest mountain that's available to you. Like what you don't want is somebody where their mountaintop is China, but you got them over in Ecuador, right? Like so you're gonna be, you could have been the greatest musician on earth, but we made you a financial advisor because everybody in the family believes you need to go do this other career instead of the one that you're meant to do. So that's what it is. It's figuring out what their strength is. Because I believe that most of us, when we operate within that particular purpose and passion that we're supposed to have, that's when you get a chance to really shine and be your best. You may suck at everything else, but if you're in that one space you're supposed to be, you're gonna win.
Yes, I love that. So parents, please just focus on your children's strength and don't get so wrapped up in what they cannot do. So most of the time when we see special education, and I always want to ask when I talk to Black men, because Black men already struggle in the world, not even in America, but in the world. Why didn't you let that label? So, because so many parents don't get their children help because they don't want to label them. Why didn't you let that label stop you?
It was really luck. It wasn't like I just had this profound vision of, it was more like I got tired of the system, and I just said, okay, this ain't working. I'm not fitting in with these schools, with these white teachers, and whatever. And so you just kind of become a rebel. You start, ending up in detention every week and whatever. And I think that again, because you're just who you are. You don't know that, you don't know what kind of person you're becoming. You just say, this is who I am. And so I guess I had that natural rebellious spirit where I would just say, well, screw this. I guess I'm the troublemaker. I guess I'm the bad kid. So I start fulfilling that role. And then I think carrying that into adulthood, I always had that rebel role. So even to this day, I have to check myself because sometimes I'll go against the grain, and I have to make sure I'm not just going against the grain just because it's the grain, right? I have to know when to say, okay, boys, you're not in fourth grade anymore. Just shut up, sit down, and fit in because it's okay. It's okay to do that. But when whatever you experience in your formative years, it just stays with you. And so that rebellious spirit has worked well for me in certain areas. Like I didn't learn until I became an adult that it's usually the rebels that get a chance to become the millionaires and the successful people and all that other stuff. The people that follow too many rules, you're limited by the intelligence level of the people that are making the rules. So if you're following, if you're a genius that's following rules made by dumbass people, then you're going to be imitating a dumbass person. And I don't want to imitate dumb ideas, right? So it worked out. I think so far so good.
Yes, and that's good. We can transition right into this question because I see, I went and did my research. I looked up everything about you, and some people don't like you because they said you
what?
Yeah, listen.
What? I thought everybody liked me. What? Who are these people?
And it's a lot of Black men that I saw, Roland Martin wannabe and all of this other stuff. How do you listen? Everybody got something to say. How do you deal with the negativity around just really speaking your truth on a regular basis? Because so many people don't.
I learned that, it's funny, like this weekend, you're participating in the Black Love Weekend and stuff like that we have going on. And I was talking to you right before we came on about the fact, or maybe right when we came on, one of the two, about how I believe that love is the secret to everything, right? Black love, Black relationships is the secret. I mean, whether you're talking about wealth and health and everything, like it links to everything. It's like an artery that kind of just goes through the whole body. And if you don't have that, then you don't have anything. And so one of the things that I could add to that is that one of the most important aspects of love is the ability to love yourself, right? Like self-love is a great starting point because you don't love yourself, then all kinds of crazy things come out of that. And so when you talk about dealing with haters and negativity and chaos around me, it's really the self-love that kind of becomes a deflector of all that. That becomes the Teflon that just kind of, where none of it really sticks, because, you're not going to tell me who I am. I already know who I am. And I've met that guy, and it's, just to take an awkward moment of speaking myself in the third person. I'm married a therapist, so I know how weird that is. And but really, like, I've met Boyce, and I like him. Like, I learned how to really respect and appreciate him, and not just the good sides of him, but to also fully accept and love the parts of him that are not so perfect, And so when you come along and you say, "Oh, you just stupid. You got a big head, and you made a mistake. You blah blah blah." It's like, yeah, okay, whatever. We just gonna keep this train rocking. We gonna keep moving. Because number one, like, you are all you got. So I can't make myself a more handsome man or a smarter man. This is what I got. This is what I got to work with. But then two, it's like, yeah, when you kind of know who you are, and you've connected with that person, you identify and you love that person, then the world can't kind of knock you off that rock. Like, you're like a rock as opposed to a leaf. Like, some people, unfortunately, when they don't know who they are, I see them like leaves that just will blow. If the wind's blowing east, they'll blow east. The wind's blowing west, they'll blow west. But if you're like a rock is not going to move with the wind. So it really, when I hear stuff and I hear opinions, and the opinions change every day, and everybody got a different one, it's like the wind blowing. It's like, whoa, it's a windy day today, but you a rock. You weigh 45 pounds. You ain't blowing away with the wind, period.
I love that. Listen, if you just tuned in, you're tuned into Men Heard Too. I'm here with Dr. Boyce Watkins, who is a wealth of knowledge. Please, if you do not follow him because he will set you free. And I just love anybody who is comfortable. No, really, because people will tell me sometimes, and I used to fall back like I was too blunt. And I mean, I'm like, okay, if the bike is red, the bike is red. Am I supposed to say the bike is hues are pink and purple? So I love that you really just share your truth. Let's talk about Black men and finances and balancing checkbooks and wealth. Are Black men unfit to manage money?
Well, I mean, you know what I'm gonna say to that, right? That's not. Yeah, I mean, it depends on which Black man you talk to, right?
Right.
So some people are unfit to manage money, right? As a general trend, Americans are just not that great at managing money. I learned that when I spent some time at the Center for European Economic Research back in 2006, and I was doing I was a visiting researcher there, and one of my German colleagues comes into the office, and he's like almost like pissed off, like he's like, what is wrong with you Americans? And I was like, well, what's wrong with you Germans? Like, what are you talking about? And he said, I looked at the data, and according to the data, Americans make 5 times more than we do as Germans, but we save 4 times more, and also we're much more financially secure than you are. So we pay more taxes, we make less income, but we save 4 or 5 times more than you do. How does that happen? And I remember that was like my first sort of experience in terms of understanding that in America you have so much capitalism, so much consumerism, and it's marketed in so many powerful, sophisticated ways. And we know Black people are kind of on the bottom of that. Like they bombard us with all kinds of stuff. And the study is like lab rats, by the way, to mind control us into buying products, or but not just buying products, like buying into a politician or some idea or something that Hollywood is marketing, some agenda, right? And that's one of the things that led me to kind of say to people that I think that if you want to find your bliss in this society, you're gonna have to really consciously acknowledge your programming and be very specific about rebelling against that programming. It's like if I meet a pretty woman that's trying to seduce me and I'm not paying attention, she might seduce me, right? But if I say, I'm not coming over there. I don't want to see your sexy body and smell your perfume, and no, I'm watching you. No, we're gonna talk about business. We're gonna talk on the phone. We're gonna, whatever it is, right? That allows me to make sure, that I'm always aware that everybody can be duped. Everybody can be sucked into things. So I think that that's what it is. You get sucked into things because they do things so subtly, so slick. When you talk about advertising and the way they get you to max out the credit card to buy something because you really think you need to have it. that the smart people are the ones who just say, I reject that program. And that's why the word consciousness is such an important word. We talk about the conscious community, and everybody uses the word conscience, but I don't know if we think about that. We have to be conscious of the word conscious. Like, what does that mean? Consciousness is the opposite of being unconscious, right? Or affecting the subconscious. So if you think about it, if you're unconscious, then you're vulnerable, right? You can become a victim, right? When people make accusations against, for example, Mr. Cosby, a lot of his alleged victims were unconscious, right? Right. So Cardi B, when she got with her little confession, a lot of her victims became unconscious, so they became vulnerable. So in general, in life, when you are unconscious, you are vulnerable. So consciousness to me means being conscious about all the things that matter to you. Conscious about your health. Like, okay, what is this food you feed me, and what's really in a piece of Popeye's chicken that I need to be worried about? Conscious about about your wealth. Now, where's my money going? How do I get my money? What are some of the vulnerabilities I'm exposed to when I'm working for white people my entire life or whatever, right? Conscious about your relationships. How do I make sure that if I want this relationship with this woman to really work, where do I get the tools to make sure that that's going to work instead of hoping that it just works out or relying on luck of the draw, where my subconscious mind is going to guide everything. And that's when all my trauma and all my little issues come in and destroy my relationship because I'm not conscious and intentional about preserving that, right? So I encourage everybody to really think about what that word conscious means and be conscious about the word conscious. Don't just use it, apply it.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, this is so good. You could just drop the mic right there. Listen, we live in this kind of sort of this bubble as Black people. We use a whole lot of excuses. You said something the other day. You said the world is being taught to hate straight men. I just want you to talk a little bit about that because I feel you.
Well, you know what? I want to address some of that at the Black Love Weekend this weekend coming up, and maybe when you're on the panel, we could chop it up about that. But I feel like in our society, we just have this weird narrative now that's being consistently pushed to say that straight men are they're filled with this toxic masculinity. I know a lot of guys who are straight who feel like they can't do anything right. If somebody says, oh, well, my husband was abusive, nobody says, well, exactly, explain that. Like, what did he do that was abusive? Like, what exactly is going on here? Let us hear from him and hear his point of view, because what happens is that you create this weird fairy tale, what I think is a bullshit narrative that women are always the angels and can never do anything wrong, and all they know how to do is just innocently stand by this terrible man, right? And men are just these demons and with this and that's not true. I know a lot of guys who are truly are nice guys who are truly hurt, who've truly been devastated in their relationships and didn't really, or at least they can't reflect on anything they did wrong. It doesn't mean that they didn't, right? Because we know relationships are complex, right? Sometimes neither one of us does anything wrong, but we both walk away hurt, right? But it's like, I think that just the way people sort of talk about relationships is incredibly biased. And also, if you think about this, here's one thing in terms of the politics of it all that I observed. If you notice, right, Joe Biden was accused of sexual assault. Nobody talks about it. Cardi B confessed to sexual assault to 14 million people. Nobody said anything about it. Bill Cosby's in jail, right? Now, I believe that if Cardi were Bill, she'd be in jail. If Biden were Bill, he'd be in jail. Why is the Black man in jail, but these other people are operating at the highest levels of society? Nobody can explain that. They can't. So that to me is just one microcosmic example of how the straight Black male is viewed differently, and particularly the Black male, but this the straight male in general is viewed differently from everyone else. Like we don't really see in the media as many conversations about sexual deviance in the gay community, or sexual deviance among, or not even sexual deviance, just any form of deviance that maybe women might commit. It's always sort of men and straight men, almost like we're the devil. And I just think that's wrong, and I reject that.
I reject it too. That's why I'm here. That's why this podcast is so important. And all the men that I have interviewed have been through some form of trauma and was never ever allowed the grace and mercy, like you said, that white men are given or Black women are given. So why is it that there's so much negativity wrapped around the Black man, and why is his leadership role always being attacked? Why do you think?
I think, well, if you go back, and by the way, I know we say we have 30 minutes, but if you want to keep going, we can keep going. I
Okay.
cleared some time out. But I think it goes back to slavery. I think that the black man, particularly those who were intelligent and ambitious and things like that, and courageous, were always seen as threats. And so to manage that threat, like I can't imagine trying to control a bunch of aggressive black men. If I'm a slave master and it's one of you and it's 100 of us, and we all about to go and kick your ass. Like you're gonna have to do some real circus tricks to control all of that. Like you're gonna really have to strategize to manage all of that. And so so if you go back to slavery, there was always an effort to find various ways to humiliate and to oppress the mind of young black males before they grow into something that you can't control anymore. And so, so that humiliation of black men or the emasculation or the butt breaking. I know Tariq Nasheed has a new documentary on butt breaking. That's been a consistent practice. When Malcolm X died, there was a guy who was a security guard for him who said, he started talking about Malcolm and his death, and he started crying about it, or he was crying, which obviously is very sad. And they said, "Why are you crying?" He said, "Well, because in America, they want the black man to stay a little boy." He said, "Around Malcolm, we got to feel like men, and that's one of the reasons why I love the Nation of Islam. I feel like, okay, these are men, they're dressing like grown men. There ain't no pants sagging, no broken English, like they're respecting women, they're protecting the community. They want to be educated, they want to be sturdy." I see that as a vision for, like, we at least need quite a few of those men to be pillars of the community. I think that's an important part of the whole Black experience. Now, we know the important role that women play. Like, there's no question. So when I talk about that, I'm not in any way minimizing the role of Black women. And I think that, in fact, to even go deeper into that, when you're sort of seeing the so-called protectors or whatever it is that people see us as, sort of being constantly chopped down into little pieces and broken in various ways, well, that leaves the Black woman just in a vulnerable position where she's got to take on roles that she may not be comfortable with. And I really believe that good Black women have always been rooting for us, even when we're at our worst and just not performing. The best of Black women that I've seen are the ones who, just really have a lot of, give us a lot of bandwidth, a lot of margin of error, a lot of forgiveness when we're not at our best. And so, it's created like this weird, awkward dysfunction where I think that if I were a Black woman and I were to say, let's say I grew up and the first man I ever loved, my father, wasn't there for me for whatever reason. Maybe something just happened with him and my mother. Maybe he ran away. Maybe he was kicked out. It doesn't matter. He's not there. I can't depend on him. I got to fend for myself. I'm a 4-year-old girl. That's going to affect the way I view everything for the rest of my life. It's going to affect how I view every relationship, because right there, I was like, okay, I can't depend on a man because, men will do whatever, blah, 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 blah. Right. Well, it's unfortunate because there are little girls who grow up in a world where that's just not the case. Like our daughters, we got 2 daughters in the house. They got 2 daddies, 2 firm, solid daddies who are financially secure, who are very assertive, very intelligent, who will protect the hell out of them, who will put a bullet in your brain if you touch either one of those girls. And so they're going to grow up, I think, with a different mindset than they would if they were in a space where all kinds of horrible things are happening because there is no protection at all. And so I think that in terms of how the Black male is viewed, I think we have to acknowledge it, right? I think that we have to sort of just say, okay, I understand why you feel that way. But then I think accept and respect the diversity of Black men. Every Black man ain't no, weak little saggy, soggy punk, they like run around pants droop down, broken English, ain't got a nickel in his pocket, no confidence. Like, there's a lot of Black men. Like, there are men right now listening on my channel who are like, no, that's not me. Like, I'm a soldier. I invest my money. I am educated. I protect women and people that I care about. So I think acknowledging, for us, I think it's acknowledging the diversity, because I know I used to get real frustrated. I remember one time when my daughter was 7 and I went to my daughter's school, and I thought the parent teacher conference was at, I don't know, 3:00, and it was actually at 9:00. somehow signals got crossed. I got there late. And I remember the teacher, she talked to me like I was her deadbeat uncle who always shows up drunk to the family picnics. You know what I mean? Like she talked to me like I was just the biggest piece of shit that you ever met. Like, oh, there you go, there it is. You know how these niggas ain't shit. You know what I'm talking about, that type of net. And I was like, no. I was like, I'm a college professor. And I'm a man. You're not going to talk to me. You're not going to address me like a deadbeat. Here's what happened, and we're going to fix this right now. And so I think that just kind of all of us really communicating all this is important. And what I like about your platform is that you're letting me sit here and just ramble away and give my perspective as a Black man. And that right there is invaluable, because I know a lot of places where Black men don't even get heard. I met a young brother one time at one of my events. He was 19 years old. He was a student at Stanford. And he followed me around the whole day and kept asking. It's like, hey, Dr. Boyce, I got another question. And I love it when young people listen. I'm like, yeah, that's a good thing for you to do, because I know a few things. But it was kind of like, dang, this kid is around me all day. And so he eventually told me his story. He said, 2-3 years ago, I wouldn't have even been interested in someone like you, because he basically said, I thought I was white. And I had all my friends were white. I was the star of the football team. He was also a straight A student, and he was an actor too. He was acting in plays, and he's around white people. He had a white girlfriend, and all this other stuff. And he said, and he got accepted to all the Ivy League schools, Harvard, Yale, Stanford, all the way across the board. And he said that all that changed the day she accused me of rape. He said, yes, she accused me of raping her. And he said, I did not do it. He said, but I didn't know how to explain to people that I didn't do it. Like there was no proof. It was just her word. And so he said that at that moment, all of his white friends abandoned him. Like he said, all my white friends that I thought I was cool with were like, oh, you're a rapist. We're not going to talk to you. And he said, the only people that stood by me were the Black women. The Black women that were in the play with me, they actually heard me. They didn't necessarily take my word for it or whatever, but they heard me, right? And eventually it was revealed that she lied, that because she was on medication and she had made false accusations before, and so they dropped everything. But he said, I was traumatized. He said, I was so scared. He said, I couldn't trust anybody. I was afraid of being, it's like, he said, I almost felt like I was being assaulted or violated in some way, because you're trying to send me to prison. He's on his way to Stanford. They're trying to send him to prison. And he said, so he gets to Stanford, right? And he goes to the Black Student Union, and he's thinking, okay, now you know how it is. You ever see somebody that used to think they're white, and then they discover Blackness, or they go through some shit, and then suddenly they want to be blackity black, extra black, at all the Black functions, right? Black power, everything, right? So he became that guy. So he goes to the Black Student Union meeting, and they're all talking. And he gets up to tell, his story. Like, as a Black man, this is what happened to me. It was terrible. And he said that one of the LGBT students stood up and said something like, you need to be quiet with your straight Black male privilege. Nobody wants to hear about your story, blah, 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 blah. Right. And he was like, wait a minute, I'm Black like you. I can't talk. Like, nope, my trauma is not as important as your trauma from whatever you went through from being gay. My trauma of being falsely accused and having my life almost stolen from me doesn't mean as much. So that's what literally led to his journey of Blackness. This is a true story. Wow. I couldn't believe it.
He realized he was Black.
Mm-hmm.
When they looked at him and that white girl said, he raped me, you immediately are a Black man. And my niece told me something about that. When my son was younger, I had a problem at a school that was mostly white. The teachers were mostly white. And he went there when he was in pre-K, so he started to get older and bigger. And my niece has a master's in special ed, so I had a problem. They said he had bit somebody. They were wearing arm coverings all of a sudden. And my niece said, let me tell you something, Auntie. He is no longer the cute little Black boy, the cute little Black toddler. He has transitioned into the threat as a Black boy, and you need to learn that quick. They real cute when they little, but we live in a society when they transition to a certain age where now he's a Black boy and he is a threat, because that's how they are viewed. Mm-hmm. So get your head out the clouds and understand what's going on. They are wearing armbands like he's some type of animal. She said, of course he is responding differently to them, because as soon as he sees that they're hostile. So that makes so much sense that I had to realize at that moment, my son was no longer a little kid. He was a Black boy, and that never left me. Mm-hmm. So do you think the Black community will always suffer financially, economically, just as far as relationships are concerned, or will we eventually get it right?
I don't. Not only do I believe that we will eventually get it right, I believe that a lot of us have already gotten it right. I think that there are a lot of right-minded people in the world, and unfortunately, what can happen though is the right-minded people can get with the wrong-minded people. So, and then they get traumatized by wrong-minded people. So it's almost like zombie bites. If you try to date a zombie and the zombie bites you, you're gonna become a zombie too. So, there was that book by Terry Williams, Black Pain, where she talks about how hurt people, and that's what happens. I think most people who traumatize others have been traumatized by somebody else, and so that again, going back to that word consciousness, I think the relationship consciousness is extremely important. One thing I observed, I wrote a book a few years ago called Financial Lovemaking. And in that book, I remember as I was researching for it, it was more about money and love, but I was researching relationships in general. And one of the things I concluded is that I don't really know if we spend enough time thinking carefully about who we're in relationships with and how we got there. You go out one night, you meet somebody that's attractive, they're very nice to you. Next thing you know, one thing leads to another, and next thing you know, you're tied up with this person for life. And I don't really know if we are checking enough boxes to decide who to even allow into our life, because a lot of snakes sneak in that way, because snakes usually show up dressed up as something other than what they are, right? And so I would almost say that that taking the time to process that is really important. And that goes back to self-love, because if you really value yourself and value your happiness and value your life and value your peace of mind and value your future, then you're gonna guard, you're gonna kind of guard that a little in a healthy way, right? But you're gonna guard that like Fort Knox. Like, okay, I got gold buried up under here. I got golden dreams. I have maybe I have some golden sex. Maybe I have, some golden, possibilities in my life. I'm not going to let any old raggedy fool up in my space. And that's true for men and for women. I've seen women, and because love is kind of a sneaky thing. Love is one of the most powerful forces in the universe, and you can't outsmart God and Mother Nature. And so a lot of us, all of us, have made those mistakes. We've gotten sucked into situations where we're like, how did I even get here? How did I end up in a relationship with a person like this? This doesn't even reflect who I am. But it does. It does. If you ever want to really understand who you are, look at your relationships. That's like looking in the mirror. And for some of us, it's hard to do, right? Because we want to detach ourselves from all of our choices. And you can't do that, right? You are, your life is a product of your choices. So I remember just sort of in my own journey, kind of figuring out like, okay, you have to be real conscious about who you let in, and the context of those relationships, because what happens is that if you do it wrong, it can ruin everything. And even to the extreme cases, I know people who have died, who've been killed and you probably do, people who've been killed because they chose the wrong situation as relationship wise. And so at that point, it doesn't matter how many degrees you got. It doesn't matter how good you are with wealth. It doesn't matter, how much potential you have, right? You're the first, Black person to get a neurosurgery degree at Harvard or whatever. Doesn't matter. You choose the wrong person to lay down in your bed. That person's could be bringing poison to your life, right? So I think that vetting process is important, and I think that little basic things, and we could talk about this, at the Black Love Weekend. I think now that you and I are talking, I'm kind of thinking about things that we can cover. But I know that, for example, just as one of many examples is that I remember I refused to be in a relationship with any woman that refuses to consider therapy as a preventative measure to make sure you learn how to communicate properly in order to have a healthy relationship. I don't believe that relationships, the complexities that they have, especially in America, because we're trying to figure out what gender roles should be and who we are, and I believe every relationship is its own individual negotiation. But I don't think it's good to necessarily have a do-it-yourself approach to relationships, or an approach where you say, okay, we're going to go to the doctor after we get sick. Like, we're going to wait till we have problems and then go see a therapist. Alicia and I started talking to somebody like when we first started dating, because she's a therapist. So she thinks therapy is good. I'm like, yeah, therapy is good. Even if you're healthy, therapy makes you better. like you learn really great skills that regular people don't know. And when I think about the mistakes I made in my 20s with relationships, a lot of it came from the fact that we were trying to solve problems that we were not qualified to solve. And so that caused, like, I think about one particular relationship. I had a great woman. I really loved her. She loved me. We loved the shit out of each other, but we were always fighting. And a good therapist could have helped us figure out how to communicate better so we could have saved our relationship. So I don't believe you should take a do-it-yourself approach, not just because it'll avoid the trauma, but also when you really tap in to that magical superpower that's available to you in a healthy relationship, you find yourself flying at higher levels than you've ever flown before.
And I always tell people this too, just listening to what you said. If you are in a toxic relationship, you're toxic. A toxic relationship takes two people to be toxic because a healthy person is leaving. And I had to learn that from my own journey of being in toxic relationships. But now I'm in a space where if it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, I'm out. And not immediately, or I'm just guarding myself. I'm so scared because I believe love is a gamble that I'm willing to take with the right person. But I noticed that toxic people that are in toxic relationships, you stay because you're feeding off the toxicity. A healthy person can say, like you said, either you're going to get help, but you're not going to tear me up. Because, like you said, bad company corrupts good character. So most of the time when we trying to change a person who has terrible behavior, adverse behavior, acting out, they usually change us. You start acting like them. So I noticed as I began to get older, like I'm 51 now, so I wish I knew what I knew now about therapy and getting the help that I need and help, asking for help. I would have had such a different life, but we all are where we're supposed to be. So how come, and I want to ask you this question because I'm sure you'll give me a great answer. How come everything is shaming and bashing? Every time I have a conversation with somebody, whether I say you need to get right because your health is suffering, because you're way overweight, I'm fat shaming. If I say something about a person who's gay, I'm homophobic. I'm trying to understand, why is everything homophobia, shaming, or bashing? Where do we just get to have conversations, and why can't we?
I think the world has changed. I think the internet has created factions of people that just we go in directions where people are going to tell us what we want to hear. I mean, think about it, and you really think about relationships in particular, something as delicate and as important as Black love. Millions of people are getting bad advice. There are a lot of self-proclaimed relationship gurus who pretty much have just figured out, look, if I just tell you what you want to hear, then you're gonna keep giving me money or whatever. And it's like if I run a gym where everybody gets cupcakes when they walk through the door, then a lot of people are gonna pick my gym. Now conscious people, health conscious people are not. They're gonna say, no, there's no way I can be healthy and you're giving me cupcakes every day. But being conscious requires work. That's why a lot of people don't do it. It requires critical thinking, and a lot of people, literally, that part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex that's responsible for critical thinking, that a lot of people, literally, they actually say that programming from just watching TV and things like that reduces the strength of your prefrontal cortex. You have to really exercise your logic skills like a muscle. And when you're sitting in front of the TV all day, and Black people actually watch more TV than any other group of people in America, it literally weakens your critical thinking skill in your prefrontal cortex. So consciousness is connected to critical thinking, which requires work. A lot of people don't want to do the work. It's much easier if I just go in a situation where I say, look, I've got this fantasy, this myth I've been feeding myself for life. Just keep feeding my myth so I can maintain this artificial environment I've created around my life, so that everything is everybody else's fault and I have no accountability and I don't have to do the work, and we're good. I will pay you to maintain my fantasy and help me continue to swim in my big pile of bullshit. Right? So people like that, unfortunately, are just not the ones that are going to respond in a productive way when you say, well, maybe all your life outcomes might have had something to do with you and your choices, right? That's a hard thing to confront. That's cognitive dissonance like crazy, right? And so I think in that world, you really have, and then you add in the craziness of politics and technology and factions. being created through social media, where they're constantly feeding you content that's reinforcing whatever point of view you have. Like, I love Donald Trump. All my posts are gonna, tell me how great Donald Trump is. I hate Trump, or I love Joe Biden. All my posts tell me how wonderful the Democrats are, right? And then you start to dehumanize other people who have different points of view. You start to say, well, the reason that you disagree with me is not because you could be rational or have a different point of view. It's because you're an idiot and you're terrible. You're homophobic. You're racist. You're this and this. I feel like that's a problem of my background's in academia, where in academia, all ideas are supposed to be laid on the table, even if they offend you, right? The truth does not care about your feelings. Your best friend, like, when you would present a research paper, back when I was teaching at Syracuse, you could present a research paper and your best friend could literally be your worst critic during that seminar, because they're giving you information that will make your paper better. And that's what something you just accepted, like playing basketball. Like, if we're playing against each other, you're going to try to score points. So unfortunately, we don't live in that world. We live in a world where people think that, okay, if you're my friend, you're supposed to agree with me. If you don't agree with me, then you can no longer be my friend. And also, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start labeling you in unfair ways, so that you will feel shame in challenging my point of view. So I think all of that is wrong. I'm vehemently against it. I'm all for the free exchange of ideas, even to the point where when I really want to challenge myself, I will actively go seek out conversations with people who disagree with me completely and challenge myself to say, okay, if I'm really supposed to be an intelligent person, I should be able to put myself in your shoes and see the world from your view. If I can't do that, then I'm not really challenging myself. And then also I'm limiting myself, because one of the great keys to strategic thinking, in my view, is to be able to put yourself in the shoes of people who disagree with you, so you can really see the issue from all angles. Most people don't do all that.
No, because they just want to be right, and that's
Yes.
where that communication piece comes in, where you talked about. Because most people think, and I study stuff. I don't have a college education, but I study stuff like communication and stuff. Most people think that communication is you talk and I listen. They don't know that there are different type of communicates, like passive aggressive, assertive. So that's like assertive communicating, where you sit down and you're able to understand other people's point of view without it becoming, we can agree to disagree. Like, so many people can't agree to disagree, and that's what drives me crazy on social media. Like, you talk, like, people say stuff, negative stuff to you about you. You want to be this, or you think you're that. For me, being on a platform where I'm speaking, I had to learn how to get my skin thick and to just ignore some comments. Because at first, when I first came on 5-6 years ago, I'd be arguing on social media with, like, you said what? That, you don't know me. And now it's just like, I'm just stating a fact. If you don't agree with me, I'm cool with that. So I got one more question, because I know you have to go, and you did give me some extra time. I just want to, why do you think that as Black people, like right now we're saying, some Asian people have been attacked in their communities, and there's a lot of that going on right now. We take on everybody else's plate. Like, when Black Lives Matter, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't care about the Asian people. I'm not saying that. But when Black Lives Matter was going on, and George Floyd had got killed, and Trayvon Martin, we didn't see a lot of Asian people saying, we got to change this, Black Lives Matter. So why do you think, as Black people, is it because we follow all the trends, or we want attention? Why do we take on everybody's plate but fail to stay the course for our own?
I would say that it's because we're used to putting ourselves in last place. I'm a big believer that white supremacy is a two-way street. It's a two-way tango. If you're white, you believe that you're superior to me, but also I believe I'm inferior to you, right? Because if we both walk in and you think you're superior to me, and I think I'm superior to you, then we just gonna have to fight it out. Like a basketball game, when the Lakers play the Clippers think they're superior to the Lakers think they're superior to the Clippers. So you're gonna have to settle it out, and the final score will tell us who's superior to who on that day. And so I think that one of the things I've concluded is that we have to acknowledge the fact that white supremacists are not always white. That there are millions of white supremacists who are also Black, because we give so much energy. People don't understand, energy and where your spirit goes. And when you're feeding into something, you're giving it power, you're giving it life. Like, I'll give you an example, actually, which is really interesting. This is kind of like a white supremacy thing, but people don't notice. Like, Kevin Samuels, actually, his platform, it didn't really explode. He was doing very well. And I think Kevin's a smart guy. He's controversial. People disagree, but his platform didn't blow up until people started attacking him. When they started pouring energy into him, like, look at this guy, he's terrible. Boom, he blows up, right? Kevin's strategic. I'm sure he gets that. Same thing. When Roland Martin decided he wanted to destroy King Randall's school and humiliate King Randall blew up. Now he's got 100,000 followers online. Rihanna's following him, right? He raised probably $100,000, all because somebody tried to attack you. So my point is to say that we don't understand that sometimes when we claim to be fighting white supremacy, we're actually fueling it by allowing the white supremacists to dictate where our attention is going to go, right? They dictate what we're going to talk about that week. They dictate what issues are going to matter for us. And so, on one hand, you have more direct things like, black folks on CNN. If Democrats are talking about immigration, they're talking about immigration. If they start talking about LGBT, then suddenly Van Jones and all, Angela Rye, they're talking about LGBT, right? But then you have, indirect stuff where even those of us who counter that narrative, who are like, no, why are you bringing that issue up? Well, sometimes we start actually fueling white supremacy, I believe, by reacting. Even if I'm fighting against you, the fact that I'm reacting to you means that somehow I'm acknowledging you. I have to see you before I even begin to even fight you. You have to be worth something to me in my mind for me to even feel like you're worth me taking the time to fight you, right? So when they talk about love, they say that, you probably heard this, the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is indifference. Because a lot of times if I spend all my time hating you and fighting you and complaining about you, I'm really kind of acknowledging that I kind of love you, that I kind of admire you, right? So what I learned actually with like, for example, this whole weird sudden campaign, like this whole Stop Asian Hate thing that's been suddenly all over my feed, you know what I do? I just ignore it. I literally I'm like people are like, what do you think about this Asian hate campaign? I'm like, what are you talking about? like I'm not like these people are not that I'm not talking about that community, but the media and the people that are fueling all this. Yeah, it's an agenda. They're trying to get people on board with a certain set of ideas. They decided this is the flavor of the month, and we're following suit. I'm not playing that game with you no more. I'm thinking about my kids. I'm thinking about my community. I'm thinking about how we can build. I'm thinking about Black love. I'm thinking about connecting and understanding Black women better. I'm thinking about helping my brothers elevate. I ain't thinking about, you tell me about one incident. Oh, in New York, a Black man beat up an Asian man. I'm so sorry for both of those people or whoever's involved in that. I hope that they do well. But that's one incident out of about 10 billion things that happen in this country today. That's one thing. I'm not going to let you decide that I'm going to center my whole world around that one thing that you decided you wanted to talk about. So I think that I would encourage people to kind of realize that one of the symptoms of white supremacy is that you kind of allow them to drag you around like a dog and get you focused on various talking points, because you can't do that to them. Like, they're not going to start talking about something just because we decided that was the news item of the week. They don't respond to us in that way, but we're always responding to them. And I think it's because deep down, remember, it goes all back to that first thing we talked about when we first got in here, that self-love thing. I believe that because we don't really love ourselves, there's something weird about being Black where you almost feel like you're nothing until they start to acknowledge you. Right. And they start giving you awards, or they give you a fancy job, or they tell you that you're smart. Then you're like, oh, I'm smart. I'm beautiful. I'm worthy. Right. When really you were worthy all along. And if you knew that you were worthy all along, then you wouldn't need these people, these false prophets, if you will, telling you that you're worthy. Like, it really wouldn't matter or wouldn't mean anything to you.
Wow. That makes so much sense, because I remember natural hair. People hated natural hair. Like, women wearing their hair natural. Everybody all women had a perm. Women was wearing weaves, and all of a sudden, when media made it popular, everybody thought it was beautiful. It's always been beautiful. My niece has always been natural. She's the one that got me to go natural 6 years ago, before it was popular. She's like, just let your hair grow. Stop
Mm.
putting that stuff in here. You got pretty hair, Auntie. What are you doing? I'm like, I want it straight. She like, Auntie, go somewhere and sit down. Like, she got me into a bunch of natural stuff, but the media had us programmed as Black women that straight was right, straight hair was right, this was right, that was right. So I love the way you just, anybody who's listening right now, stop being puppeted by America. Like, anytime America can control, or anytime a person, and stop being puppeted, period. I tell some of my clients this, like, when you self-control is the beginning of winning. When you allow another person to puppet you, when they can jar your emotions or make you angry, you just a puppet. So we got to learn how to not focus on what media is telling us to focus on, and really focus on the things that are important in our life. That's what I do. I focus on, men hurt too, because I feel like Black men are dope. I feel like I interviewed 40 Black men, right? 40. Not one of them was disrespectful. Not one of them jumped in my DMs. Not one of them said nothing smart. But that's the way they portray Black men. Like, oh, Trey, you must have interviewed 40 Black men. They must have been all trying to kick it to you. Actually, none of them actually did. And they're like, what? I'm like, because these are my brothers. So we got to change the narrative of what America wants us to think that a Black man is. I'm only around healthy Black men because that's where I choose to go. I choose to connect myself. Dr. Boyce, may I interview you? Darren Henson, may I interview you? I'm trying to connect myself to healthy Black men. So I want to give you the final word. What would you say to our Black brothers who are listening in America? What would you say to them, and how can we as Black, not only Black women, but Black people support you guys better?
Okay, well, first thing I'll say before I forget is, this weekend, you participate in the Black Love Weekend, which is the blackloveweekend.com, and it's free. And, it's something we sponsor in the Black Business School because these issues are important. The more I think about it, the more I realize relationships are everything. And shout out to people like George Frazier, who he wrote Success Runs in Our Race. And he was one of the first people to help me kind of understand that how you relate to other human beings is critically important to your success in almost anything. And it's not just romantic stuff. It's really, just how do you greet a stranger? Are you presenting yourself as helpful to that person, or, what is your gait, when you're just interacting with people? Like, I just think all those things are so important for life, success, business, happiness, all that. Now, specifically speaking, you mentioned, you said message to my brothers. What would I share with them? Well, I would say that as a Black man, my view is that we definitely don't need anybody telling us what it means to be a Black man, unless it's a person that is rooted and understands the community. There are aspects of Black maleness that nobody else really understands the way we do. Just like when my fiance is telling our daughters how to be a woman, there are times when I realize I need to step out of the room. Like, that's just, that's a conversation that's above my pay grade. I can tell them certain things, right? I can give them a father's perspective, right? But there's times where their mama needs to tell them these things, right? So I become a little baffled when people think it's offensive to say the same thing applies to men. That when a Black boy's learn how to be a man, he needs to hear some of that from another man. And his mama might be Superwoman 101. Right? We know all these things, right? We've seen all this, but that boy needs to hear from a man or two or three or 10, so he can shape his own perception of manhood. Because that's the other thing too. Even when you're learning how to be a man, I don't know if it's healthy to learn all of your manhood from one man. Like DMX, for example, talks about how his number one male role model was the guy who introduced him to crack when he was 14 years old. Right. So even when you're learning from a man, it's got to be different perspectives, because a lot of times what you see, I believe, when you see failures in Black manhood is, there are guys who learn how to become men by watching their favorite rappers. Well, sometimes that ain't healthy. Some of that lifestyle they present, they're smoking, drinking, killing, wasting all your money, sleeping with 1,000 different women. That's not healthy. Don't get me wrong. There's a conversation to be had around that. You're like, okay, if you smoke a little bit of weed, there's ways to do that, maybe in a healthy way. If you drink a little bit, that doesn't necessarily make you bad or good, but it shouldn't shape anything. Like, there shouldn't be sort of these weird, stupid deal breakers of manhood that people get. Like, I mentioned the other day how I went to Guyana, and there was this guy I met, and I think he might have been a dope dealer or something. He wore the shirt down where his hair was coming out his chest. He had a big old mansion and boats and servants and everything. And he kind of came off like this, drug lord type dude, real masculine, macho type guy. And he's like, and he offers me a drink, and I'm like, oh, that's okay. I don't want to drink. I'll take some water. And he's like, oh, well, in Guyana, we'll make fun of you if you're a man and you don't drink. And I got offended. So when you try to challenge my manhood, then I man up. I'm like, well, no, well, fuck you too. Like no, we're not doing that today. You're not going to tell me that I'm only a man if I want to drink. Because my experience with manhood was I saw alcohol in a lot of ways. My father, who dealt with being a drug addict and alcohol, he was vehemently against that. He didn't want that for his kids. So he talked to me in certain ways that made me say, I don't even want to mess with it. Whatever there is that's in that bottle, it must be good. And I don't even want to know what it is. Right. And it doesn't mean I'm going to judge you. It just means that that's my choice. That, and that's what it has to happen at the end of the day. Right. You take in information from various sources, but you got to make that choice. Right. And I think that unfortunately, a lot of our guys, when you're talking about family and community, I think that what's missing in some conversations is this lack of balance in terms of understanding how important the role of the man and the role of the woman is. A lot of people can acknowledge the role of the mother, but sometimes act like the role of the father is optional. That shit ain't optional. The mama ain't optional. The daddy ain't optional. Stop that. Right. And also, I think when you're talking about relationships, the other complexity is that every relationship is an individual specific negotiation that I believe part of that, a big chunk of that negotiation must occur without the interference of outsiders, right? One of the biggest tragedies I've seen in relationships is when you have people that are outside your relationship telling you what your deal breakers are supposed to be. Like, oh, well, no real man would ever let a woman talk to him like that. Or no, oh girl, if you really have any self-worth, you won't let that man do that. No, like I think I really think that when you're talking about your life, you spend most of your life by yourself to some extent, right? You're in your own head, you're in your own bed, you're living that life. All these sons of bitches that got 2 cents here, 2 cents there, things to say about your life, they're not living your life. Right. So maybe internally, because you have access to information that nobody else has, you may decide, you know what, this woman did something real foul to me, but I'm going to go ahead and let it slide because I don't want to imagine my life without this woman. And I know every man on the planet might call me a simp for letting this thing go. Like, I don't know, it could be she cheated on me or she disrespected, whatever. But you know what? I really don't want to lose her. And I'm willing to do what it takes to keep her by my side. And I think that you should make that decision in a vacuum, because these people will have you out here lonely. Like, you ever letting your pastor tell you what type of man you need to be with? Well, you only need to be with a man in the church, even though you in church and you don't see nothing but maybe 3 straight single men in the whole damn church, right? And 2 of them are having sex with everybody in the church. But somehow some man who knows nothing about your life is telling you that only men in the church are acceptable. No, like, you do that, because you'll end up, at a certain stage in your life and you'll be lonely and you'll be thinking about scenarios that you run into where you're like, gosh, that was a really good guy. I should have held on to him, but my pastor told me I should let him go. So I did. Don't do that, because they're not living your life. They're not going to pay the price you paid. So you have to be the final authority on those decisions, and you have to gain the courage and the ability to take in the information, take in the advice, take advice from everybody. I take advice from everyone, even people that are stupid and wrong and uneducated and got other points of view. I like to hear it all, but then when it's all said and done, it's time to make a decision about the life of Boyce. Oh, we gonna make that decision by ourselves. Ain't nobody else living this life but me. So that's probably the biggest thing I would say to anybody listening is stop letting these people, you got these people some fool on the internet done told you how to live and you really are taking that advice. I think the reason you're taking that advice is maybe because you haven't gained the confidence to feel like you're worthy of being the final authority in certain areas. And I just encourage you to reject that. Educate yourself, prepare yourself, listen to your gut. Anytime I've ever got this little trick, this little secret, Trey, is that I realized in my life, every time I didn't listen to my gut, I always made the wrong decision 90% of the time. Because you know how everybody's telling you like, no, go that way or take that job or date that person. And your gut is like, I think I want to go in that direction, but I'm afraid to tell so-and-so. And then you go in the direction people tell you. And then you're looking back and like, damn, I should listen to myself. And that's the benefit of, I think, getting a little bit older and wiser is you eventually learn how to listen to yourself. Listen to yourself, but educate yourself so you're not giving yourself bad advice, right? That's my 2 cents. I'm done.
No, you're right. Trust. A lot of people, you gotta trust the chooser. You gotta trust yourself. So many people don't trust the chooser because of bad experiences have molded them. And everything that you're talking about, like I have a program called Life Skills that I just put together. These are just basic life skills: decision making, critical thinking, communication. People think life skills is cooking, cleaning, being able to wash your clothes. No, that is critical thinking, decision making. Just different things. Like we out here making decisions based on a feeling. Like there's steps to making a decision, and I didn't know that until I got a life coach. And I encourage people: therapy, life coach is somebody that's outside of your realm. And if your life coach should not be telling you what to do. Let me just tell the people that. Your life coach is supposed to ask you some real critical questions that come from inside of you to help you make a decision based on your own things. Because what we're doing is we're asking people stuff and they're giving us their opinion based on their experience. So one person could have got married with their high school sweetheart at 16, 17 years old. And another person could have got married and their experience could be beautiful. They could be celebrating 60 years for being high school sweethearts. And this person over here can have total chaos from getting married too young. 2 different experiences. So whichever one you speak to, this one is going to say, oh my goodness, let your child get married at 16, 17. We've been married for 50 years. This one going to say, oh my God, don't let your kid get married. I got married when I was 17. It was the worst. So what we're listening to is just other people's experiences.
Yep.
Everybody's experience is different. So thank you for that. Made so much sense. So at the end of the day, when I make a decision, I always know, Trey, you're going to have to deal with the consequences of your actions. Only you.
You know what that makes you think about what you just said is there's this people make fun of me now because I play video games again. I decided I wanted something different, and I did it. My excuse is that my kids play, so I wanted to get closer to my kids, which really happened. But really, truth be told, they're kind of like my beard for adulthood, where really I feel like maturity is overrated, and I was like, I want to play video games, so that's really why you tell you if I didn't have kids, I'd probably do it anyway. But one of the things I did was I started playing this game called Call of Duty, and I was really intrigued with the game and how it just simulates real life so well. And I researched, how did they make this game? And one of the things I found was that the way they make the game is they'll go to a location, they'll take thousands and thousands of pictures of that location, and then put it in the computer, and it creates a simulation. And it extrapolates that data to create a real life scenario, which will give you, all these points of view on, like, you go into a building, you see it from every single angle because they've taken all these thousands of pictures. And I think life is a little bit like that too, right? Like every person we talk to and listen to has a certain point of view. And when they give you their opinion, it's a biased snapshot because they're standing on the east side of the building. Somebody else standing on the west side of the building, right? Somebody's above the building, somebody's inside the building. And when you talk to all these different people, you get all these snapshots and you can compile that. You use the power of your subconscious mind, which the subconscious mind is actually more powerful than any supercomputer on the planet. There is no supercomputer anywhere in history that can simulate what your subconscious mind does. So when you're getting all these snapshots, you can then form a composite that allows you to extrapolate